all of you good workers, good news to you I'll tell of how the good old Union has come in here to dwell. Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Hey everyone, for those of you who haven't been here before, my name is Derek Royden. I'm a freelance writer. I write for a website called Nation of Change most often, just about every week. Thanks for dropping in. If you're here on the YouTube, it'd be great if you could subscribe, and please come back to the blog because I always post links to my work. So today I'm going to do something a little bit different than I have been in the past. Instead of looking at an article or a series of articles, I'm just going to comment on something that's big in the news right now, but that I don't really, I'm just kind of bored with this subject, and I don't really feel like wasting too much energy on writing about it. And this is, of course, the fact that the Mueller report came in, or Mueller report as they say, although I can't help but think about Ferris Bueller and the teacher in Ferris Bueller every time I read his name. Mueller. But anyway, so the report came in, and basically it pretty much, from what we know of it now, because it hasn't actually been publicly released, we've only heard kind of, I believe it was a 4-page kind of memorandum on it by Bill Barr, who is, I think, the Assistant Attorney General. And basically it was a whole lot of nothing. And rather than taking a victory lap about this, as some commentators have, I think we should really be either depressed or angry about this, because for the past 2.5 years, the news media and politicians, I mean, they've been working practically hand in hand, at least the Democratic centrist politicians in the United States, some in the Republican Party, have been working hand in hand, using this narrative to kind of like dazzle the people, in the sense that the Trump administration has been a disaster, but not because they colluded with Russia. They've been a disaster because they've been on a deregulatory frenzy, opening up national lands to exploitive industries and extractive industries. The traumas they've inflicted at the border, which at least, like, thankfully were reported on. The war in Yemen. I mean, there's absolutely been almost no coverage of the war in Yemen, which is it's almost unbelievable. It's a slow-moving disaster that is still not stopped and is still not basically talked about. I mean, there was the bill that I think came up before the Senate last week, so that people, were in the press talking a little bit about Yemen. But millions of people are at risk of starvation, and no one seems to care. Then there was the whole thing that I think, in order to kind of show that he wasn't a Russian stooge or a Russian puppet, Trump has been making incredibly dangerous, Trump's administration, I should say. Trump, I don't think, really has that much of an idea what's going on. But members of his administration have been making incredibly risky moves, pulling out of the INF Treaty, which Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev, which basically got rid of medium-range missiles, land-based missiles in Europe, a super important treaty. We don't need a new nuclear arms race between two countries who already have the most nuclear weapons in the world. I think Russia's number 1 and the United States is number 2. They could already destroy the world many times over. This is just a insanity for the sake of profit. What's been going on in Venezuela, the fact that when Trump kind of rattles the saber, as he did twice in Syria, everyone just shuts up and says, "Oh, he's acting presidential for once." But it's only in these cases, and they do not talk about the environmental destruction that's being wreaked by this administration. A border, along two countries does not protect one country from the other country's pollution, the other country's, and Canada's almost as bad in terms of extraction. But I'm simply saying that this matters also to Canadians, should matter to Mexicans, because it should matter to everyone, because once pollution's in the air, you don't know where it's going to go and who it's going to harm. So all this time spent talking about Russiagate, which, I mean, from the beginning it was obvious that there were just too many holes in this story. Like, first they started off talking about how 17 intelligence agencies had contributed to these initial accusations that came against Trump. I think it's called the NDAA. All 17 intelligence agencies were later shown to not be involved. Obviously, the Coast Guard wasn't involved. The fact of the matter was that hand-picked analysts from 4 agencies were involved. And just the fact that people who consider themselves to be on the left are now listening to CIA and FBI talking points was completely insane. And it's as if the progressive part of the Democratic Party lost the ability to convince the people in the middle. Maybe they lost it a long time ago, probably, actually. But it's just so very depressing that they were allowed to get away with this. Even after it was shown that these 17 agencies were not all involved in this assessment, people kept repeating it all along. When the indictments came about the Russian troll farm, I think it was in St. Petersburg, a guy who I believe owns the New York Nets and is considered close to Putin, owns this place. It's literally a marketing firm, like just the same way you have people like Facebook in the United States collecting data on people in order to sell it down the line. This is the same thing that they were basically doing on a smaller scale here. Could this have influenced an American election? It could have. Would Russia try to influence an American election if they could? I believe they probably would. Were they effective this time around? I don't think so. I don't think Vladimir Putin is stupid enough to want Donald Trump in power. He'd rather deal with someone who's at least rational. But also, there were countries that actually did try to legitimately influence this election, or elections, I should say. Obviously Israel, which does it completely openly and no one minds, so I won't even comment on that. But certainly Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Turkey were all lobbying and trying to, get their person in. And for the Saudis and the UAE, it certainly looks like Trump was a guy they wanted. Trump, not only just Trump, but also Kushner, his son-in-law, because they could see that these are people who are easily bought. I mean, this is obvious to anyone who watches this. It's absolutely incredible that people would ignore the influence of a despotism like Saudi Arabia, where women are literally treated like chattel. It is incredible that even after Jamal Khashoggi, who everyone seemed to like, was murdered, nothing happens, and the relationship remains the same. Certainly, I believe that there was collusion with Saudi Arabia. I know there was collusion with Turkey, because Flynn, that's basically what he went down for. So, I mean, if the media had at least been willing to tease out the strands and look in a variety of directions for where the influences were coming from, they could have constructed a pretty convincing narrative. Now what they've done is handed Trump a gift, because when he runs in 2020, he is now, I was innocent, it was all made up, it was a witch hunt. Watch and see. So unless it's Bernie Sanders or someone of that caliber, of Tulsi Gabbard or an Elizabeth Warren against Trump, like if it's someone like Beto O'Rourke against Donald Trump, he's going to have a field day. And I will not make a prediction, but I do believe that, he could actually win. And this victory was handed to him by the regular mainstream media and mainstream politicians, who once again don't seem to have clean hands in this, because they do not report on the terrible things that he does that benefit their donors on the hands of the political class, on the side of the political class, and that benefit their bottom lines on the part of the media, their advertisers. Why does Boeing advertise their airplanes on CNN. There's absolutely no need for it. There's no one out there watching who's going to buy a Boeing plane. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents on this whole thing. I'm going to start posting the articles I did about this Russiagate thing going along over the next week. So if you'll find a link to the blog below. Excuse me. If you're on the YouTube, and please feel free to go over and check them. I'm sure there were things I was wrong about, but in the main, it's just amazing that a guy who makes like $1,000 a month can be right about these things, and people who make like $35 million a year can't even be bothered to check the basic facts, or have someone else, because they have people working for them, check the facts for them. So that's it for today. I hope everyone out there is doing well, and always remember,